Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a podcast of love, a podcast of hope. Not really, it's a podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, have asked a friend, not you, Bob, to choose their 5 favourite things about an episode of Doctor Who. I don't know what they are, so I have to guess as I watch the story and commentate along.
Hi Toby, thank you for asking me to ask you to watch a Doctor Who story. My name's Mark Campbell. I'm the author of Doctor Who, the Complete Guide. Whoops, just dropped it on the floor there. It's been various editions on Amazon, and the reviews quite useful actually, and a joke on the unsuspecting buyers. Yeah, so Fear Her is one of those stories that's, I didn't realise until quite recently, is rather unloved. Surrounded as it is by some pretty big epic 2-part stories. But have a look at it, and at the end of the story I'll give you 5 reasons why I think it's good, and see if you agree with me. What the hell?
Well, welcome to Happy Times and Places. I'm very grateful to Mark. I'm so sorry to Mark because I asked people to provide an audio and or a video. Most people have provided videos, especially because, when I sent the missives out, certainly initially, I was very much bringing these out on YouTube as well as podcasts. I still one day will do the YouTubes. Maybe that's something I can do in my retirement, or I'll work out a system, because Mark's video was lovely there. He did it on the street in the lovely sunshine, and then at the end he was chased by a scribble monster. I mean, the effort that people have gone to for this, which you currently are not able to see, but I hope I have conjured enough to make Mark's effort have paid off, that not only, did he plug his book, which, by the way, I knew first as when it was the Pocket Essential of Doctor Who that Mark also wrote, but it's come out in various different guises, and it's basically the basics of Doctor Who with little reviews, and there weren't many of those sorts of things around, and I did a lot of travelling at that time, and it was lovely to have a little book that I could sort of flick through and agree with and disagree with. I mean, he doesn't like Ghostlight, so Mark Campbell, but he does like some. But that's the joy of reading those things, isn't it? And his stuff is always well argued and interesting, and somebody's opinion is their opinion. And I think I mostly agreed. I can't remember now, but I just remember him being wrong with Ghostlight. But I can understand the reservation some might have about that story, because you are sympathetic to the flaws in stories you naturally incline towards, and you get really, really cross with the flaws in stories that don't quite float your boat. So I overlook the flaws of Ghostlight because it is very much to my taste aesthetically and in terms of its themes and all of that. That perhaps if another story that I was quite, that didn't quite speak to me in the same way, I would allow exactly the same flaws to be my weapons to sink it with. Anyway, why am I talking about Ghostlight when that is not the story that Mark has chosen? Because he has chosen a story that he likes, and he has chosen Fear Her, which I think is very interesting because it's a story that not many people talk about, do they, Chloe Webber? I have to say, it's not a story that I go back to very often. Probably, I would say, the story of this season that I go back to the least. But I didn't not enjoy it at the time, and I remember particularly actually enjoying the episode of Doctor Who Confidential, which I seem to recall showed clips from An Unearthly Child and stuff like that, and seemed to reach back a little bit. But anyway, let us. I've got 44 minutes to speak through, so why don't we see what there is to offer this story that is a little bit sort of lesser known to me, but that's no reason to dislike something. And I always feel that the stories that aren't whiz-bangers, are sort of punching above their weight sometimes and have charms all their own. And I'm inclined to look benignly upon a story that doesn't have Dalek battle cruisers and great, emotional departures or anything to help them along. This is, a one-off set of characters with a one-off menace, and yes, animated scribbles. I mean, how exciting, how different. Have no fear. Let's press play in 3, 2, 1. So it's an unusual opening, of course, because of course, London 2012. This was when that was in the future. I mean, it's now, as I record this, it's 11 years in the past. And I remember the Olympics, of course, being what a wonderful thing. It felt so great to be part of something. And I'm not a sporty person at all, but it felt so great to be part of something. And the country seemed like it had a certain sort of unity about it, and everything. I know there was elements of sort of jingoism, if you like, in that opening Olympic ceremony, but it was kind of supposed to be. It's supposed to, be a unification of all the things that we like in this country of ours. There's nothing wrong with liking where you're from. That doesn't mean you can't also get cross with it for its flaws, but there's nothing wrong with feeling safe and enjoying the things that are familiar and the trappings of your the sort of place that you grew up in and are from. Patriotism can be dangerous, sure, but it can also be something that gives you security and a feeling of identity and all of those things. Like anything, it's things are only bad if they're handled badly or used badly. That was a very good shot of Chloe Webber up in the window there, and I'm kind of liking the filming of this, which is making a suburban street actually look a bit scary. Mark was filming his bit in a suburban street not unlike this. This is Edna Dore, who was famous for being a bit of a battle axe in EastEnders, but she'd also seemed to recall her giving a performance, I think in EastEnders, but also in something else as somebody with Alzheimer's or with dementia. And doing it very well, but she also crops up in Tenko. And this, and of course the very distinctive Union Jack T-shirt on the kid, and now he's gone. I mean, that's really effective. And this is all on a sort of identifiable suburban street. Nina Sosanya there, I think, is a wonderful actress. And that is really unusual. You've never seen anything like that in Doctor Who. I love that opening because, you don't see animation within Doctor Who, really. It's not, it seems to me to be, it's a totally recognisable thing, a moving animated picture, and you know how to do it, with the flicking of the paper and all of that sort of thing. And animation of that kind is sort of not unusual in sort of kids' programmes when I was growing up, that it was, and yet to see it in Doctor Who is sort of strangely incongruous. It's a recognisable thing, but in the circumstances it is in, it seems sort of odd and yet right. It's I did enjoy that pre-title sequence. I thought that was spooky. And now this is, of course, wonderful. The parking the wrong way. I mean, that may well be one of my favourite things. And the pre-titles maybe as well. I like the moving, and that's very good. But we've got the moving train there as well. That's a really well rendered shot for the sort of opening, the effort that's got into that to make that sort of witty and fun and to have some technical skill on show, subtle technical skill on show. Now, Shane Ward's greatest hits. I did have the pleasure of meeting Shane Ward at some showbiz do. Well, he was in the cast of Coronation Street, so I wasn't just some rando. He was there, and I think I must have checked with Shez and said, "Do you mind if I say hello to Shane Ward?" But I was there with the cast, and if you're there with your partner, this was before I was in it. You are allowed to talk to people and it not be weird. You're just talking to your partner's workmates. So, and I knew somebody else in the cast quite well, so we were chatting away, and then we got talking to Shane Ward. And I think, did I post a picture up? And somebody like Steve O'Brien or Clayton Hickman, one of those cheeky scamps, said, "Why don't you ask him about being in Fear Her?" So I did. The drinks are flowing. I said, "Did you know that you had a greatest hits poster in an episode of Doctor Who?" They went, "Oh yeah, I remember that. That was really good. I was really pleased." And so I got a quote from a fairly anodyne quote from Shane Ward about being in Fear Her. So I go to the places for Doctor Who interviews that perhaps other people don't go? And is that the most obscure? Because he's quite famous, but his connection to Doctor Who is quite obscure. I love Tennant's kind of, running off and investigating. And I love this sort of, because he's got quite big fingers. And he does that, doesn't he, when he licks things, and when he almost has it that the Doctor's senses are perhaps slightly more acute than ours, but they're kind of slightly weird and alien as well. And it's just a slightly subtle thing that his Doctor has, this kind of extrasensory stuff. Which is curious and slightly alien, and it's not like the Vulcan mind meld or anything too Spocky, because it doesn't solve anything, but it might just give him a flavour of something that helps to underline the mystery or just move the adventure along or just add to the atmosphere. I like Abdul Salis. He's gone on to he was a regular in Casualty, wasn't he? And he's in Love Actually, which may have been before this, I don't know. But I do quite like his running joke of it being, I work for the council and this is a council spade and my council gloves and my council hat. I mean, it's a sort of simple, fairly straightforward character note / gag, but sometimes that's all you need to make you enjoy a character every time you see them, and he plays the part well, and it's a nice joke. This guy, Tim Faraday, I remember him cropping up in an episode of The Bill, and thinking, I know this guy, and he was in a running storyline, I think set in a prison where somebody was undercover. And it turns out I didn't know him, and I didn't recognise the name, but he's got one of those faces where he looks like he should play sort of quite a lot of, Cockney ne'er-do-well types, although I have seen him play other sorts of parts since. And he popped up in Primeval, didn't he, as some sort of clone soldier. So he's had some good work. I think he's a friend of Lisa Bowerman's. But he's got a good face for the sorts of parts that he plays. And he's sort of one of those actors that you think you've seen around a lot. I like Edna Doré. I was quite pleased to see her popping up in Doctor Who. She died not long after this. Actually, a reasonable amount of time. After 3 or 4 years, I think. Because I remember she was in one of my first ever In Memoriam videos. Nice to see her still going strong. She's one of those actors that always looked kind of the same age, because she looks kind of the same age in Tenko. But by this point, she was better known for playing sort of battle axes, I think, because she was pretty unpleasant in EastEnders. So it's nice to see her playing the sort of sensitive sort of elder matriarch of the close, if you like, and she's sort of quite gentle, and I like. I do like this bit, isn't it? It's when he makes everybody put their fingers on their lips. But I like it when a drama shows. I'm always a bit scared of mob rule and of gossip escalating and finger pointing, which is very much, with the rise in social media, kind of how we conduct ourselves these days, where finger pointing gains momentum, and suddenly people are, Goody Proctor's been seen playing out in the fields. I've had to counsel my kids a couple of times. Go, just be careful about latching onto something somebody said about somebody in the public eye, and just assuming it's true, and you can condemn them for it, because often that's a great shot. It's Eros Lynn, is it, directing this? And because he gets some of the major episodes, because he's a really, really good director. So even though this is a hugely flawed episode, when you're looking at it, you're going, but there's so much of this that is really, really well done. I love that shot from the window with Chloe Webber's hand, and then I like the shot up where she's sort of silhouetted in the window, and you have a scary kid is always a potentially fascinating part of a drama. But I love that fingers on the lips thing where the Doctor is kind of, and they all sort of respond to the innate authority, which the character kind of needs. And Russell T Davies is very clever, because he turns that against the Doctor in Midnight. So he's aware that it can be interpreted as the Doctor being a bit of a bossy smug boots, but sometimes it's very helpful for the drama and for the character, for the Doctor to be able to just go, look, I have this innate authority and intelligence that people will react to, because otherwise we spend 3 hours with people going, well, have you got any documentation to prove who you are, and why should we listen to you? We've never met you before. And the drama needs you to get over that, and sometimes you can do, the psychic paper helps with that if he's getting into an official establishment, but actually in this circumstance it just needs to be his innate, that vibe that he gives off, that he knows what he's talking about and that he knows what he's doing. Now the actress playing Chloe Webber, I remember there was stuff in the what's it called, the Doctor Who Confidential, saying how they'd done a bit of a search for her, hadn't they? And then they'd gone to a local drama group. She wasn't a sort of child actor with an agent and all of that sort of thing. I'm not sure she's done anything since. But I actually find her quite disarming, because she's the slightly sort of odd kid. Because she's not sort of stage schooly, I actually find that performance slightly more interesting and sort of more believable, because kids do say things in slightly sort of off, not acted ways, if you like. And I'm not meaning to sound like I'm criticising her, because I don't think I am. But I know some people don't like her performance, but I kind of think it works. I think she's got a slight sort of off-kilter aspect to her that a slicker performance might not have helped. A more sort of rehearsed and technical performance, if you like, might not have helped. There is something. I sort of interrupted myself when Tennant sort of runs off and leaves Rose at the beginning. I do like the fact that he just sort of leaps into the adventure and is away, and that's great for the sort of speed of the storytelling that Doctor Who needs nowadays, and it kind of speaks to the character of the Doctor as well. The cat's just gone. The cat's just gone. I mean, I think that's lovely. It's so simple that. Again, for all the bells and whistles of a Doctor Who story, we just have people going missing, or a cat going into a box and going missing. It looks, and it's actually quite refreshing to have a sort of a story set in the sun. Makes it a lot harder, if it was early evening and dark and the atmosphere closing in. But to do some of these stories, I think Eroslin directs Idiot's Lantern as well, doesn't he? Which where he has to rely on sort of abstract camera angles and the sort of period setting to do the menace, because a lot of it takes place in daylight. But I think this idea of sort of kids' drawings, sort of capturing the souls of missing children, is quite a it's quite a scary idea. I don't think. Look, I know I'm accentuating the positive, but look at the way that camera's on a slight tilt. I think that Lenny Mainter's similar in the Quarry and the Three Doctors, but this it does seem slightly sort of filmic. There's a nice wide lens there, and it just is a way of, because these are all very familiar settings, and again that makes it harder to tell this as a Doctor Who story, that it just kind of mixes things up a bit and plays with your visuals, and that's quite scary. That bang, there's it doesn't have bells and whistles to rely on, this story, and I wonder if that's one of the reasons it's less. No, because yes, I know my brief here is to accentuate the positive, but I will be trying hard. But this is not to me an obvious story to celebrate. It is definitely one of the weaker stories for me. But even so, I'm actually thoroughly enjoying this, and there's much to enjoy in it, and I have to say that's true of this era. Even the stories that are weaker to me are still stories that I would consider to be very high quality. The bar is so high that a weak story is still a 7 out of 10 in this era. This is a great era of Doctor Who. Every Doctor Who story was an event, and I suppose what they're hanging this on is the Olympics. I do think there's a tendency sometimes with modern Doctor Who, or with Russell T Davies Doctor Who maybe, to take a thing of the day and be quite excited by it, be it J.K. Rowling in the Shakespeare Code or the Olympics 2012 in this, and that kind of ages sort of fairly quickly. Dame Kelly Holmes close. I mean, although she's emerged back recently as a figure of interest, but I remember at the time feeling, because I didn't know who she was until she won that Olympic gold, and then she was a dame, and it was like, gosh, she's done an awful lot in a very small space of time. And that spoke to me of the times of, I thought it used to be you got sort of damed if you'd had a long series, a cumulative sort of effect, rather than, well, you've won a medal, you get an honour. It seemed to me, well, surely the prize you got was the medal, and now it's, when actors get an Oscar nomination, they usually get an OBE or an MBE or something, and you think, well, I thought the Oscar nomination was the prize, and in the old days, actors who got OBEs were people like Richard Pascoe and David Haig and Marius Goring, although Marius Goring, I think, got a CBE from the Conservative government because he had a slightly dodgy stance regarding South Africa. But let's not anyway. But my point is, it all. I think the fact it's Dame Kelly Holmes close, not to take anything away from her achievement in the Olympics, but it seemed like it's when reality shows book somebody, you think, oh, that's an interesting guest, and then you go, oh no, except they did that reality show in America, so the British version is just not using their imagination. And I suppose it just seemed a little, I don't know, parochial in a sense that this is very much of this moment, but I can't see some of these things having the same resonance in 10 years' time. Although actually having this with the Olympics in the future now makes it actually quite a period piece, and isn't as limiting as maybe I'd taken it to be at the time. I think I wonder if I think, oh no, because I like it when Doctor Who reflects the themes of the time, but I think when it reflects the cultural references of the time, it seems to me it maybe narrows its scope a little bit. But that might just be me always being happier in the past and in the future, and being uneasy about references to the present, which I see sort of degrading something a little bit, which I think might well be something to do with the way I approach the world, and not necessarily a fault of the storytelling. But it was certainly a thing that seemed to me at the time to be going, that this is very much focusing on something that's in the news now, but how. And of course, that's what a program should be. A program shouldn't be worrying about what viewers in 25 years will make of it. It should be how this resonates with the people watching it for when it's made. So I'm full of rubbish. I've just talked myself out of my own poor theorising. It's so easy to take for granted how good Billy Piper is, and how good David Tennant are, and how well drawn these characters are, that Rose goes off and does her thing. I don't think we've had the marmalade bit yet. I love the marmalade bit. I don't know why, because it's not quite like the Doctor as I imagine the Doctor to be, and yet I think it's a great choice. It's totally unexpected. They do it very well, where she looks at him and goes, no, don't stick your fingers in marmalade. It's quite surprising, and yet it also works to the alienness of the Doctor. I love the marmalade moment. That might be one of my moments. And of course, the sort of cuckoo child thing is becoming I started writing Doctor Who script as an exercise, really, just to see if I could. And Doctor Who is quite hard to write, and I inadvertently came up with a sort of alien child cuckoo type thing. It was different from this, but if such a thing can be a subgenre, it was in that subgenre. I'm thinking of the Night Terrors one as well, that Mark Gatiss wrote, which has a similar sort of modern day. It's slightly more urban setting, isn't it? It's not quite suburbia like this is. But Scary Kids is when it's pulled off really well, it's amongst the most frightening things ever. And I don't think Doctor Who's ever done it as well as The Empty Child, when of course that the augmentation of the child's voice with the faceless gas mask, and the gas mask, of course, that is reminiscent of the real earthly horrors of war, is such a gripping combination, and that innocent voice coming out, that it's hard to beat. And this is not in that league, I don't think. But you can see what they're going for. And actually, the scary monster in the cupboard. If Stephen Moffat had written that, we'd be thinking, oh yeah, because he's doing those things of childhood nightmares where you're asleep in your bed and you can hear things rattling about. You think you hear something in your cupboard. But of course, it hasn't got that feel here because the sun is streaming in through the windows. And it's a slightly different kind of story. There's no sort of fairy tale element to this at all. It's going for something different, and I think that's a brave choice. I didn't talk much about the scribble monster, did I? I think the scribble monster is great. I love the fact that you can rub it out. And again, it's an unusual visual, and I like the POV shot that it had. And, a graphite squiggle becoming a lethal threat to the Doctor and the companion is a perfectly Doctor Who thing to do. So there's a lot going on here that is good and that is positive. I guess because the stakes seem a little bit small, I don't know. It may just be the sun. It may just be that it's surrounded by stories that have real bells and whistles, and that if I sit down and want to watch I've said bells and whistles too much in this, and it's not a phrase I say a lot. So sorry about that. This is the bit. Look at that. Don't do that. I love that. And their relationship is so good. And he has such a drive and an energy, even when he's sort of leaning against the kitchen with his arms folded. Nina Sosanya as an actress has done lots and lots of good work. I'm almost disappointed that she's great in this, but when I heard she was going to be in Doctor Who, I had all sort of imaginings of what sort of part she might be playing. And when you're in Doctor Who, you often get the chance to play something that's got a lot of meat to the bone. And she's great in this, but I'd maybe like to see her come back and play some sort of beastly alien power being of some sort. Just because she's really strong performer and really good. So come back to Doctor Who, Nina Sosanya. That's the Spock thing, right? Is that a thing in this? I don't remember that being a thing in this. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, I'd totally forgotten about this. I quite like seeing the eyes go completely white. That's a bit disturbing. I want Chloe Webber. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? It's kind of got an Exorcist vibe, but without the head spinning and the vomiting and the somewhat potty mouth. And that's a lovely aerial shot that we have there, and you can see how nobody's actually doing anything wrong. It's just a bit of an odd choice of story to tell, but I cannot condemn it for that, because you cannot have alien invasions every week. And I think the idea of a benign creature, a kind creature, just by its very nature causing the threat, when actually all it's trying to do is to live its life, I think is an intriguing use and depiction of alien life in Doctor Who, when largely the aliens are scary things that want to kill us all, or misunderstood things that we want to kill. Whereas this is so what's the thing? They travel in a pod and they ride the heat and energy, and it takes thousands of years for them to grow up. So they float through space. That's why they're called the Isolus, which is isolated. And so basically it just wants chums. And I think that's a really fascinating idea, and I think it's a braver story to write. It's Matthew Graham's first Doctor Who, isn't it? To sort of go, well, instead of writing something that's got the living dead, or things coming out of graves, or aliens fighting soldiers on the streets, he's gone, well, let's try and have a different kind of alien that can create a different sort of threat. And it means it's not quite as gripping as the Doctor Who stories that are usually told, but I think it's really interesting. There is something a bit weird how she keeps going, "Hello, Chloe Webber," and the way that she looks at it in this scene is a bit strange. But it's a neat little effect of the flowery thing, and I think there's something. I think there's actually something quite moving about the idea of the alien creature that is pining for its family, and I'm always drawn to stories about lonely kids. And and there's some quite adult suggestions into the nature of Chloe Webber's father / Trish's ex, which are sort of touched upon. Which I don't think you'd want to go any further anyway, but that makes it slightly more sort of adult and slightly more disturbing if you think about it a bit more than what is necessarily blatant, if you like. This has the potential to be a bit more disturbing if you mull on it afterwards. And I'm always drawn to stories about lonely kids having to use their imagination. I mean, that's very Doctor Who. That's very Doctor Who's followers demographic, and I'll hold my hand up to that. So I have a great sympathy for that element of the storytelling as well. So why is this one that kind of dropped off my radar? Because so far I think it's been interesting. It's been odd. It's not as fast paced probably as a lot of as a lot of Who of this era. Probably not got quite as many jokes in it building up as well. Maybe, I mean, they have that landing, the fingers on lips, the marmalade. But this is where it all goes a bit strange, isn't it? I mean, I remember being delighted that Huw Edwards was in Doctor Who, because anything that had real life creeping into the show was always to me an endorsement. If a real life person lent their, ever since Kenneth Kendall, that's a great shot of her at the window, I have to say. Ever since Kenneth Kendall in The War Machines, if a real life newsreader was in Doctor Who, it was like proper serious BBC people were lending their credibility to my silly fantasy show. Whereas, of course, actually, if somebody says to a serious BBC staff person, "Can you just do a thing and we'll stick it in an episode of Doctor Who?" They're going to be over the moon. We've since had, we've had Kirsty Walk and all sorts. But Huw Edwards, who I've always liked as a newsreader, he's very. He's always had, I think, an innate but gentle authority about him. He's been quite poorly recently, hasn't he? I like Huw Edwards. So hearing him on the show made me delighted. But then when he started to act, I mean, you don't see him, do you? It's just his voice, but it does lead to one of the great, is this good or is this really bad moments of Doctor Who, when he goes, "Not you too, Bob," which I remember being quite enchanted by at the time, but it has kind of taken on a life of its own, and there is something about it that it does skirt on the ridiculous, but I quite like it, and I like the economy of telling the story of the disappearing crowds through the voiceover of that to me is a little bit Nigel Neal. It's a little bit using the media to tell the story, because that opens up the story to the rest of the world, because you imagine everybody else watching it on the television, and then that suddenly stops it being a suburban story and makes it a worldwide story, and that ups the stakes and spreads the reach of the threat, if you like. Oh yes, of course, because it's hot, isn't it? That's right. It has to be hot. It has to be hot because the Isolus is buried in the street, and that's quite neat plotting as well, because you've got Abdul Salis there, and you've got them tarmacking the road, haven't you? Doctor Who. Doctor Who's been got. And that's great. And then suddenly, we've upped the pace, and suddenly the Doctor's vanished. But Rose is so good at taking control. And I think that's a great sort of catchphrase for the monster, in a way, saying I love Chloe Webber. I want this companionship, and I will do. It's almost like Chloe Webber is the Isolus's imaginary friend, except that she's real. And this actually looked like it was going to be a sort of imaginary friend sort of story, wasn't it? But it goes down a different path. But the idea that the monster is doing what it wants and what it needs to because of its love for its little friend is I think is very neat and very interesting. They travel on heat, and this is brilliant. And this is quite fun, because you set him up as the guy who is like this. So of course here he is talking about the heat of the tarmacking. I put in your big book about tarmacking is a lovely line. Yes, and suddenly you go, of course, heat, the tarmacking. That's a lovely, neat bit of plotting, and it's really sad for him, because he's just eulogizing the quality of his tarmacking work. I love his council joke. I know it's a very straightforward joke, but I think it's a good joke, and I think he's good. He's a really likable actor. I hope I remember he was in Casualty for a while, and he's probably in some sort of modern programs that I don't watch, but I hope he's doing well, because he's got a real likable quality, and it's a character that has the potential, if not played by a really likable actor, to not quite work and be annoying. And I think he does it really nicely and does it really well. It's not a council spaceship. I think that's brilliant. That's very Doctor Who to me. The council and a spaceship in the same sentence, I think, is rather a terrific thing. But here the story goes a bit weird, doesn't it, when it suddenly becomes the Olympics. Now, I mean, history will tell us this did not happen at the London Olympics. Where's James Bond? Where's now Nina Susania doesn't quite know what to do there. I feel is that Rose comes in and says, "I've told you not to leave the kid," and she sort of goes, she's sort of going, "Yeah, I know, but the script's made me do it, because there's no reason why she's." It doesn't convince me actually that she's left Chloe Webber at this really important juncture in the story, and I'm not sure anybody involved quite believes it either. But that's a great economical. I'm sure it was really hard to do, but to tell the story by having the people disappearing and having poor old Huw Edwards having to go, "Not you too, Bob." But and now I love the fact that he's such a professional. He keeps broadcasting even though everybody at the Olympic Stadium has vanished. And of course, what we didn't know here is how amazing that Olympic opening ceremony would be. And I'm sure there are some people out there who are quite cynical about it. I had a personal stake in it. My stepson was there. One of the children. They had a deaf choir doing, all in their pajamas and stuff, signing a song. And so he was there for the rehearsals, and it was all a big deal. And I remember I was in the dressing room of the Frog and Bucket with Joe Lycett, actually, before he was famous, and we watched the Olympic opening ceremony in the dressing room of the Frog and Bucket where I was on that night, and I was like, "That's my stepson," and he got some decent shots. I'm sure I haven't misremembered that. Because the closing ceremony I watched when I was at the Edinburgh Fringe, So yes, I'm sure I haven't misremembered that. Anyway, that's nothing to do with Doctor Who, and of course this has been seeded in quite nicely. You can't have an Olympic story without the Olympic. This is where I think it goes a little bit. It's that all that beacon of love stuff is a little bit cloying, isn't it? I can see what they're aiming for, but it's a bit tell not show, which may be a piece of Huw Edwards' narration would do if he's a really accomplished actor. I think he's called Stephen Marzella, playing the policeman. And you don't even see his face, and he's done loads of really good theatre work. And he was listed in the cast when it was in Doctor Who magazine, saying the actors involved, will be, and you think, it could be anything. It could be, you don't know what part that he's playing, and I didn't spot him in it, and then read the credits at the end and went, oh my goodness! I mean, they barely needed an actor for that, and it just goes to show, even the smaller parts are played by actors of great pedigree. And I wonder if he had a thing of going, well, I mean, should I wait till a better part comes along? Anyway, goodbye, Chloe Webber. That's so all that, the monster loves Chloe Webber. Huw Edwards thinks it's a torch of love. That this amount of love in a Doctor Who story seems a little bit, I suppose it seems a little bit jarring that it's enunciated in the way that it is. It seems a little, dare I say it, American, although I think Americans are very good at that sort of lump to the throat stuff, which can sometimes seem cheesy to us, but when they get it absolutely right, it can be really strong. But it's, I think it's more enmeshed in their episodic television than ours. We're a bit less trustful of, we tend to show our love by people actually not showing their love, and we know that it's unspoken. This is all quite nice when everybody appears. You can see the breath. Yeah, she's cold there, isn't it? Shot this first thing, didn't they? And of course, where is Doctor Who? Well, of course, they've... it's a clever policy having that kid in that Union Jack T-shirt, because it means that he's noticeable at the beginning when he disappears and is in the drawing, and when he comes back. That's clever. This doesn't quite explain how the monster shuts the door and does all of that, but the story does need another kind of threat. If it was just the Isolus, it would be slightly underwhelming, I think. So it needed to have this upping of the dramatic ante just one more time, and that's really quite terrifying. And I think it's because the reality of it, it's not a Yeti on your Lewin tooting Beck. It's worse than that. It's an abusive father that you're locked in a house with, and that's quite disturbing. I wonder if it's too disturbing for such an anodyne story. Or a story that isn't quite as tonally consistent as it may be. But it's one of those ideas that if you think about, and it's told so simply and effectively, that shadow, that light, the horrible voice, I'm coming to hurt you, that's horrible. That if you think about, if you ponder on it afterwards, about what it's saying that a Doctor Who story actually can't depict as strongly as it would if it wasn't a Doctor Who story. And I like this. I like them singing the song. I think Nina Sosanya does that really, really well. Of how they see it off by bonding as mother and daughter, and it's quite a disturbing concept. And again, I think if you ponder on it afterwards, it's perhaps more disturbing. Although again, I think that light and the voice and the shadow is very, very effective. I think it just doesn't quite all hang together, and I'm not entirely sure why. Perhaps, I don't know. I much as I love the storytelling through it being on the telly and the Olympics and the narration, that it doesn't quite work. Even though, yes, it's great fun that of course he's going to stagger, and he's not going to make it. But no, actually the narration is not great. Does this mean that the Olympic dream is dead? I mean, it's very on the nose, which I suppose, you know, TV sports narration kind of is, but it's more than a flame now, Bob. It's more than heat and light. It's hope. I mean, that's really upping the cheese. I mean, there's a fondue there in the Olympic Stadium with Huw Edwards' narration, where I can see what they're driving at, but I think it's a bit tell rather than show. Whereas, you know, David Tennant lighting the Olympic flame, that's great and heroic and lovely. But that actually didn't happen. We had NHS nurses with hospital beds, not sad play aliens shooting off into space. But I like that, and it sort of summarizes what the Olympics was hopefully supposed to, you know, represent. And I'm not, as I say, I'm not a sporty person, but I'm not immune to a bit of pomp and circumstance and ceremony. I fall for all of the things that people hate Christmas. I like Christmas. People don't like funerals. I like funerals. I find that ceremony that brings us together and formalizes either joy or grief. I find a very useful way of processing emotion in a way that perhaps I can't without that facilitation by ceremony, by protocol, by sort of orchestrated social interaction, as orchestrated societal congregation. I need somebody to do all of that in order to allow me access to the joy or the sadness as required. And it's useful. They are useful things to do. And of course, but they end it on a kind of, and I like his thing about the edible ball bearings as well. I remember first time I saw it, thinking an edible ball bearing was just the most amazing thing. Does he say a storm is coming? Something coming, yeah. Oh, the season finale 2-part of love. Yeah. I mean, it's a simple trick, isn't it, to kind of go, yeah, let's not just end this. And the episode kind of needed that to end on a kind of, and of course, this is the lead up to, how exciting was this? To Torchwood, of course. This is the season that's been building up to Torchwood. Yikes, yikes, yikes. And what I love that 2-parter. I love this whole season, actually. And I wonder if I watched this trailer more than I watched. And there's a look at that. They knew what they were doing. We knew the Daleks were coming back. That was an extermination effect from the episode afterwards. It's amazing how much they're showing. My goodness. Cybermen. Beautiful. Oh, and there's Freema Agyeman coming into Doctor Who for an episode and getting killed, never to return. Look at that. That was a hell of a long trailer, but anyway. Oh, and look, the cast is going up beautifully slowly, so you can read it. Oh, Edna Dore hasn't got an accent on her name, which she should have in real life. In fact, I read an anecdote about her that she won an award at for one of her performances at a French television festival, and she was announced on stage as Edna Dore. She said, "You'd have thought in France they pronounced my bloody name right, because it does have an accent on the E, so it was Dore, Edna Dore." Anyway, bless her. Even these credits seemed quite fast to me. You have to sort of teach yourself to digest those and learn how to read them. But I mean, those are positively snail-like compared to the zip past we get these days, which I've done many an angry tract on. So let's not go over that again. So I have to choose 5 favourite things about Fear Her. which I don't think is going to be as difficult as maybe I thought it was. I actually enjoyed that. I think I wouldn't want every Doctor Who story to be like that, but I wouldn't want every Doctor Who story to be like The Caves of Androzani, whereas it may have been... I remember thinking it was fine when it was first on. And as I say, it had a really enjoyable episode of Doctor Who Confidential for some reason. I can't remember. I just remember... But maybe sometimes you're just in the right mood. I think Chloe Webber doesn't quite work, and I don't know if it's the actress's fault. She's having a go with doing the different sort of voices and the whispering of the Isolus, but it's and it does have a peculiarity that's quite beguiling, but I don't know if it's never really scary. And certainly I think Huw Edwards' speeches tip over from the documentary style verisimilitude into the slightly lamentable and silly. But there's plenty. I like the suburban setting. I like that thing of the kids suddenly disappearing. I like the cartoons coming alive. It's got plenty that it's Abdul Salis's council joke. It's got plenty that, and again that is before the big. I was going to say bells and whistles again. Dalek Cybermen 2-parter that is a big headline news to end the series, and prior to that you've had. You've had the Satan Pit, the Impossible Planet, and then the strange anomaly that I adore, Love and Monsters. I think, Fear Her gets a bit lost in that, and probably not unfairly. But that said, because Doctor Who exists as a great, big, glorious mosaic, I do not object to its existence, and there will probably be an afternoon where I decide, I'll pop that on and quite enjoy it. And in fact, having done this commentary on it now, I thought, I wish... And some of my rewatches where I will, to be perfectly honest with you, quite often I would skip it. I might go, actually give it it's like a nice little break, before the final sprint with the big battles and the big heart-wrenching emotion and all of that. And of course those seasons were planned and structured rather meticulously, and actually you'd soon get bored if it was all big action adventure or big, spooky, high octane stuff. You need the ebb and the flow, and that does that mean that was ebb or flow? Anyway, listen. What are my 5 favourite things? Well, I certainly like the TARDIS. Materializing the wrong way round, and actually it's a smarter effect as well. It's got the moving train and everything, and because it doesn't need to be there, and they go, well, let's make the effort to do this. That has no impact on the story at all, but it's a nice little bit of color and texture, and it's a funny gag. I like the moving drawings. I think the idea of it being kids trapped in a drawing is a really scary idea. That again perhaps doesn't quite work as well as it might in execution, and I'm not entirely sure why, but the novelty of seeing a child's drawing start moving, and you've just seen that child keeping in goals in his front garden and he's just disappeared, I think is lovely. I think that really does work very effectively and is suitably different. So that yeah, I'll have that moving child's drawing, but I'll tie that in with the whole of that sort of pre-credit sequence, which I think is a spooky and novel way to start a Doctor Who, although in keeping with the you set up a mystery and have a shock moment. I like the Scribble monster. It's only an incidental threat, but it is. It's one of those. I love it when Doctor Who goes, "What's a thing that we know is a thing?" Oh yeah, scribble on a bit of paper, a bit of a doodle. I'm gonna make that my monster. My graphite cloud of death, my lead Nasher of danger, and the fact that you can rub it out, which I love, and it's a neat effect, and it has the POV shot as well. But it's taking an everyday thing and turning it into something, turning it on its head. making offbeat. That's how Doctor Who works really well. Yeti on your loo and Tooting Beck, drawing on your suburban street in Dame Kelly Holmes Close. So I like the Scribble Monster as an idea and in execution. I like Abdul Sass. I like the council joke. I'm sorry, but I do. It's a nice little note for a character. Doctor Who is better when its supporting characters are memorable and fun, and he's both of those things. And he works it well into the drama, because he's got the whole thing about he's laying his tarmac, and he's just finished laying his tarmac, and we need a heat source. There we go. So that all works quite nicely. And I think the last thing, which doesn't necessarily work as well as it might, but I do like the concept of an alien who poses a threat because it is lonely and it needs love and it needs companionship, because loneliness and a lack of love are terrible, terrible things. And we don't often talk about how terrible those things are, and we often have to just cope with them. And I like Doctor Who going, well, let's have a manifestation of those terrible things that we don't really talk about, and you can't really address, certainly really in a Doctor Who story, because it's not that kind of show. But if I can manifest it as part of the makeup of the alien threat, that means I can explore those issues. And you've got a single mum there and a kid and the spectre of this, this dad, whatever he was, whatever he did that's only alluded to, which is quite adult. But the idea that, but the scary dad, I think, is a cracking idea. Again, maybe works. Maybe because they can't be too blatant about it. That's one of the other bits where the jigsaw doesn't quite fit together. I'm trying to account for why this isn't as loved as perhaps it might be, and I have to be honest too. Although, as I say, I perfectly enjoyed that. I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. As I say, even the non-headline stories in this period of Doctor Who are to me still in the upper echelons of Doctor Who, because they're so well done, they're so well thought through, they're so well paced. The anti-ups all of the time. Just when you think you know where a story's going, it brings something else in from left field. Even the incidental scenes have a little grace note or a little character note or a little something between the regulars, or a little something given to one of the guest cast to keep you interested and to keep it quirky and to keep the dynamic good. So all of that, but I've sort of got away from my original point. I think for my thing number 5, it is that idea that let's do an alien menace that is a menace because of things that we identify with that aren't often treated as malignancies, if you like, in television drama, and certainly not in Doctor Who, but that are real life things that we've all put up with at various different times, and have actually more power over us than we would often like to admit, and that is loneliness. And that is feeling unloved or needing somebody to love. And I applaud them for trying to tell an alien invasion story using those as the platform. As I say, it doesn't quite work maybe in the way that you have to give sort of Chloe Webber her whispered monologue about it, and the over mention of, I think, love in it is a little bit on the nose and doesn't sit easily within UK drama, I guess. But I applaud them for having a go, and I like the idea behind it. So, what have I done? I've gone, and I like the marmalade. Did I say the marmalade? Hang on, what is that? I said the landing. I said the moving cartoon. The landing, the moving cartoon, the council joke, the scribble monster. I've got to have the marmalade. So because the love thing and the loneliness thing, but I think that's the most intelligent point I've made for the whole thing. But can I turn my back on that for the marmalade? Having, I thought, actually hit upon quite an interesting thing to to provoke a discourse on about loneliness and love. Oh, well, what would I lose for the marmalade? Because I do like the marmalade. Oh, I've got 6 favourite things about Fear Her. Who'd have thunk it? And, that takes away. I love the red light in the wardrobe, and I love that. And as I've talked about how, scary things in wardrobes is a very sort of primal, Moffat-y childhood fear to be thinking of. I love that. I like the cast of sort of unobtrusively just good people. I like the suburban setting. I like the disappearing Olympic crowd. So there's so much stuff there. But do I? So I like more than. But I've actually chosen 6 things. So I'm gonna have to lose one. Opening gag, which is very funny, which is great. That is great. Cartoon. But I do like that because it's different. But do I love it? I do because it's not something that Doctor Who usually does, and yet it fits in exactly with the sort of thing that Doctor Who should be doing. I like the Scribble Monster. I do like the Scribble Monster. It's a sort of incidental threat that is, pure 100% proof Doctor Who. I like the council joke. Maybe I just like the fact that the love and the loneliness manifesting the alien threat makes me feel good for having said all of that stuff. As a viewer, that aspect of it, I think, is not perhaps as potent as I intellectualized it as being. So yeah, I'm going to drop the love and the loneliness bit, though I did enjoy talking about it. And I'm going to replace it with a man sticking his fingers into a jar of marmalade, because that's the kind of intellectual I am. So those are my 5 favourite things about Fear Her. Mark Campbell, who's written a guide to Doctor Who that has been published several times in several different forms. As I say, I got it when it was a pocket essential. But it's on Amazon, the Essential Doctor Who Guide. Mark Campbell. It's just a great sort of dip in and out. Everything you need. And in fact, when it was first written, when I first had it, it was before the series had come back. So I've got it about 3 times, I think, because then it was re-released, and because the Pocket Essentials were a series that did lots of different things, but I got the Doctor Who one. But this was before the series had come back. So then he re-released it with updating it with the new series episodes. So I think I have got the book about 3 times. Anyway, so Mark is going to give us his 5 favourite things about Fear Her. Let's see if I concur.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that, Toby. The first thing I liked about it was the TARDIS landing the wrong way round. I thought that was a lovely little throwaway gag. It was sort of done in Ghostlight, wasn't it? But rather subtly. And I'd love to know whether they found those 2 metal boxes exactly the right distance apart, whether they had to put them the right distance apart, because it's perfect. So I just like that because it's a nice little throwaway gag.
Oh, 1 to me. God, that's a great start, isn't it? It had to be that. It's such a great moment. It's really sad that you can't see this, because it is a sunny day, just like it is in the episode. And Mark is walking round a sort of suburban close, very like the one in the story. So he's gone to great effort there. I'm sorry that you can't see it. So right, 1 to me. What's number 2?
The second thing I liked about Fear Her is the Scribble Monster. I just think that's such a kind of silly, uniquely Doctor Who thing. And I think it's just very effective and very simple. Must have been quite cheap to do, I guess, but I think it's a bit of fun, especially when the Doctor erases it in the TARDIS. I just think that's it doesn't make sense, but I think it's quite cute, really.
And I think it is the erasure of it, which is such a beautiful... And again, it looks... But some of those effects that look simple actually are probably quite hard. I don't know. But when an effect looks simple, it makes you think it's real, because you go, oh, that looks quite simple, because I'm totally convinced there, because it doesn't look like it's been hard won, which actually means it's a really well rendered effect, and the rubbing out, I think, is glorious, and it's a lovely and very Doctor Who. And what's exciting here, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else, is that we've done 2, and I've got 2, so I only need another 1 thing, the same as Mark, and I've won. And oddly, now let's not get ahead of ourselves. I still haven't got to the Olympic flame yet. I could easily stumble. The one story that I have won with is Love and Monsters, which is the story directly before this in transmission. And this is interesting because when I do it with episodes, I do the favourite thing at the end of a classic series. I sort of keep a running tally, because at the end of episode 2, I know whether I'm, even Stevens, or whether I'm, miles behind. And I think that sometimes affects my performance, that if I'm close, I'll then overthink it and screw it up and choose the wrong thing and snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, which I certainly think I did with the cave people story with Jim Sangster, and I've done it a couple of times. So this is interesting because I'm going into this blind, because I choose all 5 before I listen to any of what my guest does on the new series stories. And let's not get ahead of us. He's now going to choose 3 completely different things. He's going to choose Shane Ward, edible ball bearings, and Bob disappearing. You watch.
The third thing I like about Fear Her is the scary father in the cupboard. I think that's very clever, having him say, or disturbing really, having him say, Chloe, I'm coming to hurt you. I mean, that's just nasty, isn't it? I don't know if it carried some kind of, if you've been affected by the issues in this programme warning at the end of it, I don't know. But also it's in a kind of dark riff on Christopher Eccleston saying, Rose, I'm coming to get you, at the end of Bad Wolf. And I think it's very, very clever. Again, cheap, but clever, the way you don't really see him. It's just all done with shadows and lights and sound effects, and then having them sing that Kookaburra song to, well, just sort of, instead of saying, I deny this reality, just sort of sing that to give them strength to realise it's not real. I think it's a lovely little moment.
Yeah, well put, Mark, and absolutely right. And I think I remember it not quite landing with me at the time in a way that I think it did, particularly this time watching it, when it is remarkably strong, the spectre of that father, and it's remarkably grown up for Doctor Who. And of course they have to allude to a lot of it, but what it's saying is extremely grown up and extremely disturbing. And yes, anything with Doctor Who that does what it does, that causes fright or creates adventure through, simple means. And I don't mean, this is not to undermine it, but what I'm saying is economical means, a shadow, lights, a voice. I love it when Doctor Who does that. I was never impressed with big horror films that had sort of gore and vicious, dripping maws and, totally mobile animatronic aliens, because I know it's been made, and I'm sure that a lot of those things are, well, I know they have great ingenuity and creativity, but also have lots of money thrown at them, and of course everything is relative, and all of those people probably had to make compromises and use their own ingenuity. But I'm talking about the ingenuity on Doctor Who's terms, especially with what it is in competition with, in a way. It so often comes up with the goods, with suggestion and intelligent application of some of the sort of humblest ingredients. And I love it when it does that, because it's a testament to imagination in the face of limitation. And that, to me, is a great human characteristic, and it's a great characteristic of creative endeavour. So, yeah, lovely. And in another story, I might have chosen the dad, but I was spoilt for choice with this, which is a testament to Fear Her. And now I can feel victory falling through my fingers. But I hadn't really thought of the echo of Eccleston's refrain in series 1. That's an interesting parallel to draw. Well put, Mark. Thank you.
I love that bit where the Doctor says, if living things can become drawings, then drawings can become living things. I think that's just a lovely, creepy line, he says. And of course, that's a bone of contention, isn't it? Fear Her, people say it's very derivative of a film called Paper House, which I think is based on Marianne Dreams. But there are lots of other stories. They go right back, where pictures or photographs have come to life. I mean, M.R. James, the mezzotint, is a famous one where a painting of I think it's actually a hospital. There's a figure in the front crawling, and every time you look at it, the figure has crawled closer to the edge of the picture. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of examples before that. I think it's a lovely, clever idea having the children appearing as drawings, and then the way they're sort of animated in a very kind of rudimentary fashion. Again, I think really suits the story, and I think it's again sort of only in Doctor Who, if you like.
And I hadn't picked up on that line this time around, and I don't know of that movie that Mark is referring to. So that's that's something for me to educate myself with. But certainly the principle that just because Doctor Who echoes something that has been done elsewhere, well, some of my favourite Doctor Who's echo something that has been done elsewhere, and sometimes I think Robert Holmes would sort of gleefully admit to borrowing wholesale, and sometimes it's just because there's something in the air. I know as a comedian, whenever an event happens, 10 different comedians will independently think up the same joke, but that's because there are a finite number of things to do, which is why in many ways I applaud Fear Her for, within Doctor Who's format, trying to do something that is different on so many levels. The living pictures thing, yes, that is a thing. The mezzotint is a very spooky story, and in fact, between Mark recording this, I think, and me doing this, because a lot of these have been hanging around in my archive for a while, there's been a BBC version of the mezzotint that Mark Gatiss did. But Sapphire and Steel has a picture story as well, doesn't it? And there is something about pictures which capture a still moment can be quite affecting. Certainly old photographs. I know these aren't photographs, they're drawings, but drawings in a way, because they are a parody of human animatedness, because they capture a still moment. And drawings have an added abstraction in that they're drawings, they're not photographs. They're not actual capture of, still life, as it were. But still life is even, it's not life because it is still, which means it is a strange perversion. It has something slightly, taken, like in a way that we're scared of robots because they walk and talk like humans, but they lack that humanness, the unhappy valley which creates robophobia. Perhaps we, the haunting nature of old photographs where you're looking at a moment of time captured right now, and those people since then have lived their life and seen through their own eyes as you're looking through your own eyes now, and lived and died and gone, and yet there they are in that moment, captured forever in time, is a thoughtful and spooky and unnerving and yet strangely celebratory thing about the rather profound idea that you can capture a moment of humanity, and yet you can't quite replicate humanity, because humanity is impossible to replicate, because we have some kind of X factor that stops us being able to be sort of created from scratch, that spark of life. But that also means that having gone being 2-0 up, I'm now 2-2, and it's all to play for with the final choice of Mark Campbell.
My last point, the fifth thing I really like about Fear Her, is, well, I'm going to say it, it's the Doctor carrying the Olympic flame. Now, come on, that is a real hero moment. Okay, in real life, he would have been shot by snipers. But this is Doctor Who. And I just think it's a lovely feel-good moment, and why not?
Oh, you know what? He said, my favourite moment is the Doctor, and I was going to go, sticking 2 fingers in a jar of marmalade. I do think it's a great hero moment, and I think David Tennant is great at those hero moments. And I thought it absolutely had to happen. You had to have that stumble, and Rose, who's been missing the Doctor, see him, not be missing, see him be alive and there to save the day and to light the flame is a great. It's brilliantly placed within the drama. But I think because it comes off the back of the bathos of Huw Edwards' apocalyptic narration of doom, which I adore, but in the same way that I adore certain performances in The Haunts of Nymon. I think it's slightly compromised by that, and it's not as good as the Fingers in the Marmalade. But I can see why Mark loved that. Do you know what? Do you know what? When I got those first two, I thought, I'm in here, boys. I've got this one. Got this one. It's in the bag. Who'd have thought Fear Her, the most remarkable thing about Fear Her, is going to be that it enables me to win a Happy Times and Places. You see, it's not over. You think you're there, and then you stumble and you fall. And if that's not a metaphor for something Olympic, then I don't know what is. Kelly Holmes kept on running. That's why she's a dame. I went over the first two hurdles and thought, I've got this, boys, and then smashed into the next three and came in last. No medals for me, but there's still a bit left on Mark's video, so let's see what else he has to say as he signs off.
Well, I hope we agreed on some of those things there, Toby. Thank you very much for having me on. If you want to go to my Bowler or Fez film reviews, which is on YouTube and Insta and Twitter and all that, where I review films and either give it a bowler if I don't like it, or a Fez if I do, or equally buy one of my books, which have mixed reviews on Amazon. Anyway, thanks very much. Cheerio.
Oh, bless him. And he illustrated that by putting on a bowler on a Fez. I really liked Mark's video. I'm sorry that you can't see it. Maybe in the future one day when I get a bit ahead with the YouTubing business, but I'm more comfortable, I have to say, with this podcasting business. It's a bit easier for me to put together a decent product than the painstaking YouTube stuff, which I'm afraid gets a little bit in the way of my day job, which this isn't. This is my hobby, but I still try to do it as well as I possibly can, and I hope you enjoy what I produce. But I've had to diminish my impact on YouTube because I think the limited time and resources that I have are more productive. And I have more aptitude for elsewhere. But I've saved it all. It's all in an archive. So I do have that poor hard drive that's got loads of different camera angles of me watching Doctor Who. That maybe one day. But I've just realised I haven't actually filmed this particular one, so you will never see this. But it's a shame because I don't want to waste Mark's video. So if I was to put this on YouTube, it would just have to be a series of telesnaps of me, because I haven't recorded this, even though I've actually got quite a natty. I got it for Christmas, quite a hairy cardigan and kerchief combo that no, you'll never see. So the telesnap guys are going to have to recreate that, or just shoot me from the neck up. Anyway, Mark's, I'd forgotten about Bowler Hat or Fez. Check that out. Buy his books. God bless him for saying they get mixed reviews on Amazon. Everything gets mixed reviews on Amazon. If you like a Doctor Who guide that you can dip into and pick up the salient facts from, and my favourite bit's always reading a pithy review and going, oh, I'd go with that, or oh, I wouldn't. Is always a fun way to spend time, and it gets you off your screen, doesn't it? And I certainly spent many a happy hour reading and rereading The Pocket Essential when that came out, which I fear was probably before some of you were born. But thanks to Mark, who I think I've only met the once, but I'm grateful to him for going to such an effort with a video that will maybe one day see the light of day. I actually really enjoyed Fear Her there, and I would be tempted to watch it for pleasure. And next time I'm going through those early series where I tend to leap to I probably skip past The Idiot's Lantern. I probably skip past Fear Her and go straight for the big headline grabbing two-parters, and of course that very strong opening run. I would skip New Earth as well, generally, and go. But that opening run of Tooth and Claw School Reunion and Girl in the Fireplace. I mean, that to me is as strong a run of Doctor Who as you could hope to get. I love that. I love that run. Are the 3 stories in a row that are, maybe Robots, Talons, Orifang Rock? That's that, yeah. I really like Face of Evil, which a lot of people are a bit down on. I think Face of Evil, Robots, Talons is pretty strong. And Face of Evil is one of the stories that Mark doesn't like in his book. And I remember being furious with him for that. But all is forgiven. And we were so nearly in accord for the majority, which would have won me this. But I fell at the final hurdle, so a storm wasn't coming. I actually got rained on during the parade, and my flame went out. Oh, for a doctor to light it again, which hopefully he or she will do in the next edition of Happy Times and Places. Please join me then and there. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydoke, and my special guest celebrating Fear Her was Mark Campbell, who can be found on Twitter at bowler_or_fez. I'm grateful to Mark and to the patrons who make this podcast possible, and they include Tom White, Stephen White, Sydney Wilson, Andrew Willis, Rhys Williams, Michael Williams, Rich Wiggins, Adam Westwood, Gary Wales, Apollo C. Vermouth, Sabrina Tirabassi, Damien Timmer, Nick Temple, Neil Tate, Stephen, Tim Smith, David Shepherdson, Graham Slate, Jim Sangster, Mark Sandham, John Rivers, Dylan Rees, Scott Pride, Kevin Parker, Jonathan Potter, Melvin Pena, Dave Owen, Graham Knott, Matthew Newton, Christopher Newman, Nathan Moore, Stuart Mitchell, Ross McPhillips, John McClay, Jason Mayo and David Matthewman. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. I very much hope you enjoy these podcasts, and if you do, apparently you can like and subscribe them. Well, no, you can like them and you can subscribe to them. So putting both of those things in one sentence makes it awkward to conclude, as I've just demonstrated. Liking and subscribing is apparently a marvellous thing. I do like getting my algorithms polished, and apparently it's the done thing to do to encourage you to do that polishing, which you can also do by going to iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and giving these 5 stars. We live in a universe of extremes. Only 5 will do. And leaving a nice few lines of review to tell passing punters what these podcasts are all about and that you like them. It really does help and makes these endeavours worthwhile. If you would like to support beyond that, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydoke, where, amongst other things, you can get your name read out on the credits, as some people you'll have heard just have. They earn that right by subscribing via Patreon and paying from as little as £3 per month. There are higher tiers. The higher you go up, the more often you get your name mentioned, but that's pretty much, I mean, there's the odd badge here or there, but that's pretty much, and the odd, a couple of extra access things, but that's pretty much it. The lowest tier gets you all of the content. It's a horrible word. How's your content today, Toby? Full and regular. Well, I don't like it at all. But it's the way of things. As this is the way of things as well, sort of, whoring myself out for as little as £3 a month. But I'm a self-employed creative person, and it's what we have to do. Stop being apologetic about it, Toby. Very rich and famous people do it. You can. All right, I am. This is it. And now my internal monologue has escaped outwards. Anyway, £3 per month gets you bonus releases, advanced releases, Happy Times and Places. It's a good 6 months ahead. And the other two, Indefinable Magic and Too Much Information, are usually a month ahead. Sometimes I get even more ahead than that, and then sometimes I fall behind. It's the nature of these things. And there are monthly AMAs, and you can send me messages, all sorts of other things. It's fun. It's a nice sort of community place to be, where people who enjoy talking about character actors and inner monologues and little trivial things and our experiences as Doctor Who fans can pop in and join in, or not. You can just be a silent partner. Anyway, that's patreon.com/Toby Haydock. There's also a Ko-fi option, kofi.com/Toby Haydock. Social media is the thing as well. If you could tell the world of social media that you like these, it helps. If anybody asks you what Doctor Who podcasts are out there that people should be listening to, if you could say Toby Haydock's Time Travels, that would be very nice. They have their own Twitter feed, these podcasts, at Haydock Podcasts. I also have mine. I still try and be positive, but I don't always. I talk about some other things other than Doctor Who. There's more to me than Doctor Who, you know. I mean, not much, but there is. And that's at Toby Haydock, TobyHadoke. I also have a Facebook page. I've got one that's sort of me, the way I'm put pictures of my kids and stuff like that, but I don't at the moment, but I'm turning that into more of a personal thing. If you're there for my work and the things that I do and the things that I put out there, I don't like the phrase fan page, but there's a page. I mean, it's still me. I'm not going to pretend I have people or media managers. It just means I will have two different spaces, one for my content and one for my not personal life, children, the pictures of my garden, whatever, because I'm told one has to separate those things. I wish we could all just be out there, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Don't rue the particular shortcomings of our social media age. They're well rehearsed. Anyway, I'm on Instagram as well, which I'm terrible at. That's largely pictures of my dog at the moment. I need to get better at using Instagram. I'll probably master it when it goes out of date. But I have a bash. I was very pleasantly surprised doing Fear Her. I do feel bad that Mark did that lovely video, but nonetheless, I thought there was lots to talk about there that was very interesting, and. Yeah, I love that about Doctor Who, because nobody really talks that. It's the title. I think the title doesn't quite sit with me as well. Not because it's bad. I think it's because it's unusual. And I have to say, I'm much more of a Attack of the So-and-Sos as a title. Those were the ones, because I was used to being lured into Target books that had exciting titles. Doomsday Weapon is much more exciting than Colony in Space, so I quite approved of that policy. Although, of course, if had I realised the other way around, I would have been appalled. They've changed the TV title. How dare they? But it will always be slightly Doctor Who and the Doomsday Weapon to me. Doctor Who and the Cave Monsters. Isn't it funny? It's what your first experience of something is that is the right one. Because, yeah, if they now released a Target-style novelisation and dared to call it by a different title from the title of the televised adventure, I would be livid. Doctor Who and the Fear Her. And I sort of admire it for attempting to do something different, and yet I don't like it. Is that, am I allowed to do that? You can sort of go, I appreciate the thought processes behind it. I actually quite like the feel and the sound of it, because I can't quite get to grips with it, because it's Fear Her, that's really unusual. They just called it Attack of the Scribbles, the graphite of death, the torch of love of death, invasion of the torch of hope. Doctor Who and the Not You Too, Bob. um, sorry, I do love Not You Too, Bob, and I have to say I've been thinking about since I recorded that bit. I don't think there are many bits in modern Doctor Who that are, in old Doctor Who, where sometimes because of the multi-camera nature, people have to bide their time before something kicks in. Quite often happens, doesn't it, when K9 zaps somebody and everybody has to wait because nothing's been quite timed right and it's all been done live, and then they've had to put the beam in afterwards, and it doesn't all quite match up, and everyone has to sort of hang about, sort of not acting too much so it's distracting, but also not doing nothing so it's a pause. And I do feel that bit where Rose runs in and is it Trish is downstairs, having come downstairs, leaving her vulnerable alien adult daughter upstairs, and Rose sort of goes, "Why are you doing this at this key moment in the drama?" And she does sort of stand there going, "I haven't been given any lines at this point, but also there's nothing I can do that can adequately explain this not particularly convincing oversight on my part within the drama. But we're just going to have to ride this out." and I, as I say, I think modern Doctor Who is remarkably free of such moments. So it's almost comforting in a way to go, with all our modern bells and whistles, we can still have those slightly shonky moments. But I mean, as I say, largely I'm a great fan of Doctor Who. I'll tell you what I'm not a great fan of, and this is going to be confession time. And I'm very pleased with Mark's contribution to this project, but I always do a shout out for somebody's Twitter, and Mark's Twitter, because of his film reviews, is at bowler_or_fez. And you know what I don't like? I don't like it in email addresses either. I'm not a fan of the underscore. I think it's a confusing piece of punctuation, especially to have in something as key as a Twitter feed, or where I first encountered its overuse in people's email addresses, especially as when I was started the membership scheme, my comedy club, which I used to do the door at, as well as MC, as well as, I'd make the posters, I did everything. And when we did this membership thing, which was to prioritise people who were regulars, I got people to write, but it was a way of building up a mailing list as well. I'd get people to write their email addresses down. But if you write your email address down, handwritten, an underscore and a dash are fairly interchangeable. And there aren't many other pieces of punctuation used in email addresses. The at thing doesn't look like an ampersand or anything else. It is very much its own thing. You can't misinterpret it as something else. An underscore, just waywardly hovering or dipping, or a dash just slightly dipping, one can be mistaken for the other. And you have to kind of, when you're sort of typing in email addresses or something, you have to commit. And if you're not sure, you feel a bit wrong and a bit dirty, kind of going, "Oh well, I've gone for the underscore and it might be a dash," and and it discombobulates me, and I don't like it. And I find the overuse of underscores actually one of the worst things about modern life. I don't like it. I'm always slightly disappointed in somebody when they give me their address and it's got an underscore in it. Use anything else, a number, just a silly word. I just don't like underscores. I fear them. So sorry about that. So yeah, if my mate says my email address is Bob_Anderson_sausage2000, I'll go, two underscores, not you two, Bob.